authentication in applications can be tricky. One benefit of OAuth is the ability to use third-party authentication systems to authenticate our users. In this video, we're going to see how to allow our users to sign into our web application using their Twitter login. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. I do that by providing videos here on YouTube multiple times per week. Plus, I host a weekly podcast. I also provide courses on C#, web development, and much more at IamTimCorey.com. The profits from those sales are what pays for the free content here on YouTube, so that everyone can have a great education in C#, not just those who can afford it. Now in this video, as with most of my videos, I'm going to create some source code. If you'd like a copy of the source code, use the link in the description. All right, let's go over to Visual Studio and let's create a new project. And I'm using Visual Studio 2022 Community Edition. It's the free version, free from almost every case. And I am going to be using .NET 6 for this. And let's create a web app, which is going to be a Razer Pages application. So we're going to use Razer Pages. We're going to call this our Razer, let's call this Auth or Twitter Auth demo. And Twitter Auth demo app. This will just use Razer Pages. We could use API, we could use Blazor, all those will work, but we're going to use Razer Pages for this just to be a little different. Remember that all of the web project types inside of .NET 6 are all based upon ASP.NET Core. That means that they really have the same stuff behind the scenes. They work the same way. So they have the base core stuff in ASP.NET Core. So let's look at just Razer Pages because it's simple. Let's go with .NET 6. We're going to change the authentication type to individual accounts. We will configure for HTTPS, no Docker, and we're not going to use top-level statements. Or I'm sorry, we are going to use top-level statements. We're not going to turn them off. So we'll leave that unchecked. We'll hit Create. And what it's going to do is create for us a web application that has a little bit of authentication associated with it. So to show us off, let's create a new page. Create a new page, Razer page, inside of Pages, make it an empty page, and we'll call this secured page. All right, and this is going to be our secured page, and we're just going to have an H1 here that says secured page, and then a paragraph. Oops. There we go. This is our secured page. You need to be logged in to see it. Really simple, right? And then we come over here to our secured page.cs, html.cs file. And over our class, we're going to say authorize and hit control dot to add the using for Microsoft.asp.core.authorization. And that will say that you have to be authorized in order to view this page. So we're going to run this in just a minute. And if you're not familiar with Razer Pages, they're very simple to use. They're basically individual pages. It's a server-side language, which means that this C# code that we just saw in here, this code will all get compiled and built into an HTML page. So for example, all these things that say @ in front of them, that's all the Razer syntax, and that will get removed when it gets built and sent to the client. The client never sees any C# code. All they see is the completed, compiled HTML and CSS code. And if there's any JavaScript, it will send that too. So each Razer page is kind of a standalone page. Now, what we're going to see here is that this page has the authorized attribute, which means you can't go there unless you're logged in. Now, it doesn't matter who you are. We haven't dealt with claims or roles or anything else. We just said, hey, I don't care who you are. You just need to be logged in. That's all we care about. So let's launch this. Before we do, though, because this is using the identity system, there's a couple things I want to tweak. First of all, in appsettings.json. This is a connection string. And this connection string sets up for us a connection to a database where our authentication information will be stored. Information about users and roles and all the rest. Well, by default, we get this generated database name. So it's going to store in localDB/mslocalDB. To go to SQL Server Object Explorer, we'll see we have localDB in here, and we have databases, and there is a bunch of databases in here, which localDB is basically just files that act like databases for local development, for testing purposes. Now, when you get ready to publish this application, you would change where this points at, but this works great for development. But this is going to create a database called ASP.NET-TwitterAuthDemo- and then this long GUID right here. So this is the entire database name that it'll create. That's probably a little too much. So how about TwitterAuthDemo-DB? Now, I just made that up. So it does say trusted connection equals true. That means it's going to use whoever's logged into this computer, they have admin access. Okay, so this TwitterAuthDemo-DB, well, that was not in the list. There's no Twitter anything in this list. That means that Entity Framework is going to create this when we tell it to. Well, let's tell it to now, because we could try and launch this application, and it will launch, and it will go to the page to register. But the problem is going to be that when we do that, it's going to have to create the migrations and build our database. It's going to create an error page for us. And on that error page, we could click a button that says apply migrations. It'll apply them. We can refresh the page, and there we go. That's kind of a messy way of doing things. So instead, let's go to the View menu, go to Other Windows, and go to Package Manager Console. Once this updates, and I apologize for the small size here, I'm going to zoom in because for whatever reason, the Package Manager Console does not take the font size recommendations I gave it in Visual Studio. So in here, we're going to say update-database. That's all we need to do. It's in the right spot. We hit enter, and it's going to build our application. It's going to create that migration. So there we go. It's creating a migration. It's figuring out what is already there, which is nothing. And then it says, okay, I'll go ahead and build out this database and apply all the changes. So now that that's done, we can unpin that. Go back to SQL Server Object Explorer. Under Databases, let's hit refresh. And now we see TwitterAuthDemo-DB. And in here we have a bunch of tables that say ASP.NET user tokens, users, user roles, user logins, user claims, and so on. So there's lots of stuff in here for our authentication system. Yes, we are essentially hosting our own authentication system. In other demos, I've shown you how to use an entirely external system like Azure Active Directory B2C. That's a great system to use for external identities because it's all hosted somewhere else. It's hosted by Microsoft. It's controlled and taken care of by Microsoft, and you just manage the database through the portal. But in this case, we're saying we're going to create a SQL database that manages our authentication for us. So with that being done, we can now launch this application. And there we go. So there's our web application. And if we go here to secured page, it doesn't go there. It goes instead to this page that says, no, you need to log in. And this happens because we're not logged in. We're not authenticated. So it will not take us to that secured page. So instead of going to the login page, let's go to the register page. And notice right now, use another service to register. There's no external authentication services registered. So we're going to register locally. So whenever you have a system set up, you can register locally, or you can register using a third-party service. In this video, we're going to show you how to set up Twitter as a third-party service to register as. But To begin with, let's create a local registration. So test@test.com. And no, we're not going to use a suggested password. Let's use a simple password like so, and we'll hit register. Now, because this is a demo application, we don't currently have a real email sender registered. Now, what this means is normally when you have a person register on your site, it will send them an email to confirm their account. So when they say that they're test@test.com, obviously that was a fake email address that I gave it. It would say your account's not set up until you confirm with the email we sent to test@test.com. Well, I don't own that. I can't confirm it. Therefore, it's not going to allow me to continue. But if I gave it my real email address, the email would come to me, I would click a link and confirm it. However, we don't have that set up. But since we're in development, we can click here to confirm our account. I do that and I confirm. Now, obviously, we do not want that in production. This is only for testing purposes, but that allows us to not have to set up a private email system and all the rest. Now that I've confirmed this account, I can log in. I can log in at test@test.com and my password. Your password has to have an uppercase, a lowercase, and a special character by default. Let's hit login. And it says, no, I've got it wrong. Let me try this again. There we go. Hello, test@test.com. So I am logged in, and now I can say secured page. And notice I go to the secured page because I'm logged in as test@test.com. I now have access to this page where I didn't before. So that's basic authentication inside of an ASP.NET application. Let's log out and let's go back to the home. And remember, again, we can't go to the secured page. Won't take us there. So now we can close this out and let's talk about adding Twitter authentication to our application. So how do we do that? Well, first we need to add a NuGet package. So manage NuGet packages. Let's go to browse and look for Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.authentication.Twitter. If I spell it right. There's a lot of different authentications, but .Twitter will give us this list. And there is Microsoft.ASP.Core.authentication.Twitter. And it comes from Microsoft. So we install this package. We hit accept. Now, next up, let's create a Twitter registration for our project. Before I do, though, I do want to point one thing out that does come as a bit of a confusion. When we set this up, we are not going to receive a password, the user's password from Twitter. So when they log in using Twitter, they will not be giving us their credentials. That's not what happens. Instead, we allow them to log into Twitter. And then Twitter tells us, yes, they logged in, and here's a token saying they logged in. It does not allow us to log in as them. So just to be clear on that. Okay, so let's go over to, I've already got it open here. This is the dashboard for developers for Twitter. You might have to sign up for this. But if you go to developer.twitter.com/en/portal.dashboard, I think it's just /portal.dashboard. You can forget the en. I believe that'll get added by default based upon your language. But this is where you register your applications. Now, I do want to point out that this is not an unlimited thing. You can't get as many as you want and go crazy. There are some limitations on how many projects and applications you can have for free. You can pay to have more, but there's a limit on how many you can have for free. I think that's reasonable. Otherwise, they'd be full of lots of projects. So You can either, and notice that if you go to the dashboard, it says create a project to use a version 2 endpoint, which version 2 is a new version for their API endpoints. We don't need a version 2, and you can only create one project and it only can have 3 applications inside of it. And it's actually a developer testing and production application. But for version 1.1 access, which is all we need, then we're going to use the standalone app. All right. So it says you can't use the most current version 2 Twitter API endpoints. We're not using all the endpoints. We don't have to worry about that as much. If you wanted to create a version 2, that's fine. It's just more limited in how many you can create for free. So you can create up to 10 apps in standalone. So we're going to go that route instead. So let's go ahead and create an application. Now, we need to give an application name. This is, if we go back to our application, let's go back to Visual Studio. We call this the Twitter Auth demo. So let's go ahead and stick with that for our application name. Obviously, in a real application, you'd want to give it a real name. So whatever the actual application is you're creating, that's the name you give it. And this is important to note here that while this is a demo and we're showing demo stuff, when it comes time to create a real application, you want to be very careful to make sure you choose good names here, because this is what gets shown to the user. This is what you track it with for your application usage and so on. So just having demo names is not a good idea for a production application. Let's hit next. And it looks like it's already taken. No problem. How about that? So if it's already taken, put your name in it. Okay? That way it's more likely to be available for you. All right, we hit next, and sure enough, it's available. Now, you see us and go, oh my goodness, team, you're showing us our keys. Yeah, I am. I'm also going to delete this as soon as I am done, but still, don't copy it. Don't be that person. So I'm going to copy these off so I have them. It's good to write these things down. All right, so I've written these 2 things down. We don't need the bearer token. That's to pull specific data. We don't need that. Let's go to app settings. So now I have my application created, but we're not quite done yet. Notice we can edit this to change the name or the app icon and the description as well. So again, for production use, you definitely want to do that. You definitely want to change the icon, not be the default Twitter icon. You'd want it to be as clear as possible who is asking for this and why. You go to Setup here, and this is required. What are the permissions you need? Limit the amount of permissions you ask for. Do not say read and write and direct message. That's going to scare users, because why should an application that's supposed to just use my account to log in and that's it, why should they have access to read or send direct messages? That's not a good idea. So we only want read access, the very least amount possible. In fact, I really wish there was another option here that had even less permissions. There was just authenticate and read basic profile information, not even tweets. But it is what it is. Read is pretty low permission level. And yes, we do want to request the email address from the user. And then down here, what's the type of application? Is it a native app, meaning it's installed on iOS, Android, Windows, or Mac, or is it a web app? It's a web app. Okay, so we're going to choose web application, and then we need a callback URI. All right, so when the application is done authenticating the user, it needs to know where to go. And to do that, here's the callback URI. HTTPS, localhost, and then we need a port number. Now, I don't know what the port number is, so let's find it. So in our application, under Properties, Launch Settings, we're going to launch this under Kestrel, which uses this port number right here. How do you know? Well, because it's Twitter Auth Demo, that's right here, that's the name, versus IS Express. So we have IS Express or Twitter Auth Demo. We're launching under Twitter Auth Demo, which is Kestrel. And then it says application URL. We have two options here. But notice this one is HTTPS, whereas this one is HTTP. We redirected the HTTPS version for everything. We should use HTTPS for everything. Therefore, we're going to choose 7198. Now, this is going to be different for your application. This number here is randomly assigned. It's not going to be the same for your application. So make sure that you choose the one that's right for you. So in my case, it's 7198. So 7198 is my port number, and then sign in -Twitter. This is the default for the callback. If you get this callback wrong, the authentication will not work. So it's whatever your URL is with /signin-Twitter as the end portion of it. That's how you sign in with Twitter. Now, you may say, well, Tim, that's not the right URL. That's only for my development server. What am I going to do about the staging server, the production server? That's where you'd add another URI. So this right here is for my development server. That's all I need because that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to deploy this. But if you wanted to deploy it, then you'd add other URLs here. Okay, website URL. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky, and you need to be thinking about production, because this URL should be, it's going to be shown to the user, and it should be your real URL. It should not be something like a test URL. However, since this is just for demonstration purposes, we don't have a real URL. So what do we do? Well, if we just say localhost : 7198, that won't work. It'll say, nope, not a real URL. But if we say localhost.development, it will, or .dev. So this URL will work, but again, I cannot stress this enough. When you're doing anything for a real application, even if this is the development edition of that real authentication, you should put your real URL here. Organizational name, we're going to leave that alone, but that's again where you'd put who you are. So for a development application, no big deal, but if you're going to show this to any users, it should have a real information here. Organizational URL. Again, that should be real. And then these two required, terms of service and privacy policy. I'll put the same URL in here, but these two links are required because we asked for their email address. So you need to have a terms of service. You need to have a privacy policy in order to use this. So this is fine for development, but again, it's not okay for production. You need to have a real URL here that points to your real terms of service and your real privacy policy. Let's hit save. Okay, that's it on the Twitter side. So now let's bring back our Visual Studio. And in here, we're now set up to start using Twitter as our authentication piece. But in order to do that, we have to configure it in program.cs. So let's do this. Let's go to, we have to add a service, and let's add it after our default identity. Say builder.services.add authentication. And then on the next line, we'll say .add Twitter. And we're going to configure our options like so. And these will be the configuration options for Twitter. We only need to have two. We can have more if we wanted to bring in additional information. There's a lot more depth we can go into with this configuration, but we're going to stick right to the more common top-level stuff, and that is we need two things. We need the options.consumer key, and we'll just leave it blank for now. And we need the options.consumer secret. And you may be thinking back and say, oh, you know what? I saw a key and a secret that came from Twitter. And you're right, we need to bring those two things in here. However, we don't want to hard code them here. Like if I wanted to, put it right in here, no, that's not a good idea. Don't do that because we cannot change that when we go to different environments, meaning we can't have a different one for development versus production, which we do want. So the way to solve that is to put it into our configuration, app settings.json, and so on. However, we don't want to put it in app settings.json because we do not want to have a consumer secret or consumer key in our source control. So this is something where we put the eventual production configuration either inside of our Azure configuration or an Azure Key Vault or something similar. But for development, what do? We use secrets.json. So if you right-click on your project and you say Manage User Secrets, you get this configuration right here. And this will allow us to create some JSON that will override app settings.json. So in this case, I'm going to create a node called Authentication. And then inside here, I'm going to have one called Twitter. And inside here, I'm going to have an API key. And I'm going to have a API key secret. And the API key is going to be this value. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to copy this section right here. I'm going to put it into app settings.json. And the reason I'm going to do this, I don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it because I want you to have a structure for when you put it in your apps, your secrets.json, because you will not get my secrets.json. That doesn't come with the source code. So this is going to be just for me. And again, do not copy what I'm pasting on the screen here. The key and the secret, they will not work for you, and you need to have your own, okay? You don't copy keys and secrets to other people. But this is going to override what's in app settings.json. So when it comes time for you to download the source code, again, you can do that in the description. There's a link to download it. When it comes time to do that, you're just going to copy this right here, go to your secrets.json, paste it in, and then paste in your API key and API secret. That'll make life a little easier for you. Now that we have that, we can come back over here and we can say builder.configuration and ask for a given key. Authentication, Twitter, API key. Let's unpin this so you can see the whole thing. Yes, it's long, but the colons here indicate the levels. So if you remember back from our app settings, we had authentication. There's a colon here, and then Twitter, and a colon, and then API key. That's how it navigates that tree. So let's copy this, and let's paste it in here. But instead of API key, it's API key secret. That's the two values we need. Now, if you wanted to, and we're going to get into this a little bit, but if you wanted to, you could have Facebook authentication and Microsoft authentication, Google authentication, and GitHub authentication, and a lot of different authentications here. You would just add them like you're adding Twitter here. So instead of a semicolon here, you would say on a new line, add Microsoft or add GitHub or whatever else. But again, you have to have those NuGet packages installed for those. So, and we'll talk more about if you want to see those, we're going to talk more about how to see those and how you want to see those. Okay. So we'll get to that in just a minute, but let's go ahead and run this application. All right. So now I am here and I can come to log in, but I can also register. And now I have this button. Now, again, we haven't styled this and we could make this a whole lot prettier, but this button right here is now shown up. Instead of having that, there's no external ones configured, we now have the Twitter button. We click, I didn't do anything to do this. It just knew because we registered it right here. So let's click on it. And this is what we're going to see. It says, do you authorize Tim Corey Twitter auth demo? Remember that name we chose? To access your account. And this application will be able to see tweets in your timeline, see your Twitter profile information, see your accounts you follow, mute and block, and see your email address. Again, I think that's probably too much information, but it's the least amount Twitter will allow me to ask for. So that's what we were asking for. And also notice over here, localhost.dev and this description and that image. These are all things we could have modified in our profile. So when the user says authorize app, we come back over here, it redirects us. And so you've successfully authenticated with Twitter. Please enter an email address for the site below. Since we did not grab that directly, even though we could, there's more configuration we can do to get that. But I'm just going to say test2@test.com. You can't use the same email address. All right, so click here to confirm. All right, so now you can go log in and go Twitter. And it goes, cool, hello, test2@test.com. You're logged in. And if I go to that /secured page, I can go there because I used Twitter authentication. So now with my users, they can either log in using an email address and password, or they can log in using a third-party application like Twitter. So I can click there and it redirects them right back in with one click as opposed to multiple clicks or remembering another password. Twitter handles that for them. Now, again, we don't have their Twitter credentials. We're just asking Twitter, did they successfully log into you? And Twitter says, yes, they did. Therefore, we're cool. All right. So that's all we're doing there. Now, again, we can get more information from Twitter. So you can ask for their name, you can ask for their, or gather their email address instead of having to have them type it back in. And there's a lot more we can do on that front. But this is the basics of how to use Twitter to authenticate people on our applications. All right. Now, again, we can gather more information in order to create claims, in order to monitor claims and say, okay, this person has more access. But that's the basics of how to use Twitter to authenticate on a ASP.NET Core web application. That would include API, Razer Pages, MVC, Blazor Server. So there's a lot of different UIs we could use, but using the same system to authenticate them using Twitter. Now, like I said before, there's other authentications we can use. We can use the Facebook authentication or GitHub or Microsoft or Google. And again, the list goes on. And we can add in multiple into one application. Now, I just chose Twitter because I thought that would probably be a pretty popular one, but it's pretty representative of how you would do the other authentication systems. However, I am curious to know if this is enough for you and you can take this and run with it, or if you want more information in some way. So do you want to see a couple more videos with a couple more of your favorites like Facebook or Microsoft or Google or something like that? Do you want to go in more depth? Do you want to see some more options here on YouTube? Do you want to have like an introductory course on this? You know, there's I think like 10 or 15 different types, like, you know, Facebook and Twitter and all the rest that you can authenticate with. There's also things like how to get more information from them and how to use them in different user interfaces like Blazor Server and so on. Do you want to see that in a full course, or do you want to have it a full in-depth course where we go even further depth, where we kind of dive into the intricacies of how this works and how to configure it and so on? I'm just curious because as I got into this, I wasn't really sure how much more you want to see. Now, I do want to point out this is a very popular topic on the suggestion site. In fact, this was the #1 overall suggestion. So let's actually, I'll pull it up here. Let me bring it up. And we have 371 suggestions right now, but the most popular is third-party authentication in .NET 6. Thanks, Neil. Well done on the very highly rated topic. So my question to you is this enough? Or do you want to see even more on this topic? Do you want to see, again, a full course on it? Do you want to see just a couple more videos? What do you want to see? And so what I've done is I've created a YouTube poll. So if you go to the community tab on this YouTube channel, there is a poll there. It'll be open. I'm not sure how long, but if you're watching this in the first couple of days of launch, go there and let me know. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are and how far you want to go with this, okay? That will determine what I do from here. I'm not going to promise anything, but I want to see what your thoughts are. All right, so thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are as well. But again, go take that poll, please. Go answer that poll and let me know what your thoughts are on future content. All right, thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.